Okay.
What might St. Mark's passage be saying to us this morning? As you listen to the story again, meditate on the images you see. Who are the characters, and what does their place in the story mean for us today in our community? One can imagine that as early in the day, the sapphire blue ocean rushes to and fro upon the beach, and young children are playing in the froth that is left behind. Women are outside their homes chattering about their neighbors' bad habits, while warm breezes scatter sand into the bread dough pressed firmly in their hands. And their husbands are gathered along the ocean, preparing for their noonday sail to catch the sunning tilapia, a curious fish that is only caught with trickery and a quick net. But there is a disturbance along the bank. A traveling wonder worker and his 12 companions have stepped out of the boat near the city's gate. Believers and skeptics drop their nets. Some climb down from their boats, and several young women scoop up their children in their rush to see this man. And there are others too. There are those who are desperate for this man's wonders. Some need a miracle, while others need a miracle for someone they love. They press in, hoping to see and be seen by him. They hope to be seen by this man who's known to have control over raging seas, vicious demons, and bodies twisted by disease. There are so many pressing in to experience this mysterious man that only the tallest and those at the front of the queue can see him. But there are two who are so desperate for his healing that they press through. The fear of discovery or being mocked by believing so deeply in this man could leave them publicly humiliated. But their desperation has welled up to such a point that not even deep humiliation could stop them. The first one to reach this man, this Jesus, was a man named Jairus. Jairus was well respected in his community, and he had a large established household. He was a leader of the local synagogue, and he was respected for his character and religious purity amongst his community. While Jesus may have been Jewish, he was not a very good Jew. In fact, several saw him as an unclean and evil Jew for his work. Therefore, Jairus risked a great deal in seeking out his healing touch. But Jairus could not be bothered with formalities or the possibility of public disgrace. His daughter was dying. Jairus was wealthy, and he could have afforded the best care, the best doctors for his child, but they could not save her as this man could. Flinging himself at his feet of this healing nomad, he begged Jesus, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come. Lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." Without even a word, Jesus follows him. But on their way to the little girl, an unnamed woman, filled with desperation and hope, pushes through the crowd to reach for Jesus' cloak. Almost missing him, she catches just the hem of his robe, the coarse muslin fabric, covered in mud and still wet from the sea, slipped through her hands. And in that single moment, in breathless shock, she knows that she has been healed. The disease that has made her unclean in the eyes of her community, that left her broken, desperate, and alone, that stole away years from her life, and perhaps even her chance at marriage or having children. It left her in a single moment. But her moment of joy is matched by a moment of terror, when Jesus stops and asks, "Who touched me?" She knew that she had been made well at the touch of his cloak, but what would it cost her? She has nothing. Her disease has made her poor, and this man will surely want to be paid for his miracle. Trembling for the punishment that may meet her, she steps forward to admit her shame, but there would be no shame for her today. In her time, those who could not pay their debts became subject to their debtors. However, this was not to be her fate. Rather, this woman who was alone in her suffering would suffer no more. Jesus looks to her and tells her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." In this moment, Jesus confirms at least 3 radical truths about this woman's life: that she was in fact healed, that her faith publicly displayed made her well, and that she would no longer be alone, that she was, in his words, a daughter of God. We can imagine Jairus, though, being driven to tears in this moment, seeing both the healing power of the woman's faith and yet frustrated that Jesus has stopped to heal a woman who is alive, even if she's not well. But this happiness that may have lingered in the crowd as a result of this woman's miracle is quickly shattered. Jairus' daughter has died. Jairus' rush to collect Jesus has been in vain, even more so when we realize that he has missed his daughter's last moments in his life. But desperate the servant's proclamation about the girl's death, Jesus encourages the man, telling him to have faith, to have faith. Unlike the earlier events, Jesus' miracle will be enacted in private. Only the girl's parents and their 3 chosen disciples, Peter, John, and James, will witness her rising, paralleling the transfiguration to come, while echoing miracles of the past in which Elijah's widow's son was restored and the Shunammite woman to life. Jairus' daughter will be raised in her home with her family. Once in the room, Jesus takes the little girl by her hand and says to her, "Taliti kum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the little girl opened her eyes and pulled away the blankets that were wet with her family's tears, and got up and began to walk around. Her family was completely amazed, and Jesus interrupts their astonishment with just a very practical detail that you need to give this little girl something to eat, because it is not a hoax. She is alive, and she is here. Here again, we see the power of Jesus and the confidence that is found in faith. Where Jairus' household laughed at the idea that Jesus could raise her from the dead, he did it with little effort and in little time. But what does this story mean for our community today? Well, the story does show us that the girl's resurrection, along with the woman's healing, give way to the realization that witnessing miracles does not give faith, but rather it is faith that gives way to miracles. What strikes me the most in the story is the accessibility of the divine, that all are welcomed by God. Where the little girl was from a wealthy and prominent family, pillars of the community, we might say, the unnamed woman was unclean, destitute, and alone in her misery. Despite their contrasting situations, though, both were embraced by the healing power of God's love. Both of them sought out, or others on their behalf sought out God for them. I know that we like to joke here at All Saints that we should be better named All Sorts, where everyone is welcome. But I believe this is the message that St. Mark is making known to us in the story, that all sorts are welcomed by God, that people from every situation are deeply loved, and that all people may enter in the Holy of Holies and be touched by the divine. I believe that many of us can see ourselves in the characters at work. Jairus might be represented today in our community as the cradle Episcopalian, one who has served on the vestry and maybe even attended seminary. Perhaps she is one who dutifully cleans the linens every week. does the children's Sunday school, volunteers for the food drives. Knowing how big and busy this parish is, I'm sure that some of us can see ourselves as Jairus from time to time. But others here may see themselves playing the role of the unnamed woman, poor in spirit, friendless, misunderstood, chronically sick. Perhaps many of us have had a season playing the unnamed woman's part in the story. Perhaps we were rejected by our families for those we loved, or we cast out by the churches and communities of our childhood because others could not understand the way that God made us, because others decided that we were unclean. But we do not see this, Jesus making any differentiation between these two separate characters. While Jesus may have had a right to be skeptical about Jairus' intentions, as last time he healed, a plot was made against him by the leaders of the synagogue, but he doesn't. Without question or hesitation, Jesus rushes to the leader's home, and for the woman, if we are reminded that evil and antiquity was seen as something that was contagious, that one's bad nature or one's sinfulness could be spread from person to person with just the slightest touch. One could have expected Jesus to be publicly reject the bleeding woman for fear of touching him and making him unclean. But Jesus doesn't even acknowledge the weight or legitimacy of these realities. Rather, he accepts the woman and makes it known to the community that she is a child of God. In short, it is clear that people from every walk may reach for the touch of Christ. And in the same way, we see Jesus reaching out in our community today, reaching out to church people and unchurched people, reaching out to Catholic, Roman, and Protestant, reaching out to Republicans and Democrats, reaching out to gay and straight, reaching out to those in the Metro Transitional Center, and to those who cradle themselves outside St. Luke's on an icy evening. All are loved and sought out by God. Here in this story, we see that regardless of one's situation, no one falls outside the scope of God's healing touch. No one is turned away, and all are welcomed at the table. And in the same way, we are allowed to reach out to God, even if it might be embarrassing or we fear to be rejected. We see in these two stories how all may approach God. Therefore, as we go into a time of prayer, I encourage you to reach out for the divine in your daily life. Whether or not you feel as though you deserve to, whether or not your faith has been challenged by devastating news, I encourage you to be still and encounter Christ. For those in our community who have been cast away, I also pray that we see and embrace them as Christ does, and that we may welcome them into our community so that they may experience the divine, so that they may experience the love of our family of all sorts. Amen.